And let's talk ARob here, guys, because all's been quiet on the ARob front, except for last night. He was actually going after my former colleague, Daniel Goodwin, on Twitter. But Bryson's like, any chance the Bears get an extension done with Allen Robinson in the coming weeks? July 15th is the deadline, so we're about a month and a half away. I'll say this much. The Bears are not in any way, shape, or form going to be negotiating with Allen Robinson, because ultimately, when you look at it, this is very clear to me that had they been serious about getting Allen Robinson, what would happen is that they would have somehow gotten an extension done. Now, with that said, is this entirely off the table? No, but it's just been tabled for the rest of the year. They're going to have to revisit this next offseason, because you can't, if you're Allen Robinson right now and you look at the potential that Justin Fields has, you have to be telling yourself, if this kid's the real deal, then I might as well take a bit of a discount to stay in Chicago, knowing that there's going to be a proven quarterback option, compared to me testing the market in free agency and some team with a young quarterback going after me. But I'm not going to know if that guy's really as proven as Justin Fields is, because Justin Fields, and I'll let you go right here, Max, is as proven as it gets.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of thoughts on this, and I've been thinking about this for a while. I was with Anthony every step of the way. We were actually at a Tampa Bay Lightning game when Kenny Golladay signed with the Giants, even though, he spent a good night in Chicago. He chilled out the two cities and figured out which one he liked the most. But back on the O-line, real quickly, we do have Kush back, which I think is incredibly interesting, that we do have a ton of depth at the moment. So it's really entire competition. Juan Castillo brought stability, and what's the second most important thing? Consistency. David Montgomery balled out when the line was consistent. So that's what I'm really excited for coming up, is we have consistency. But back to ARob. Look, this market was awful for free agents across the board. I mean, look at the list right now of names that haven't been signed yet. There are some big time names who are genuinely talented players who haven't gotten signed anywhere yet, because this free agency market has been awful, but it's been specifically worse for wide receivers. This has been a terrible market for wide receivers. So if Allen Robinson tested the market, he wouldn't have gotten nearly as much as he would have wanted. That's why it was so surprising that Kenny Golladay got the haul that he did. But that's why they literally locked him into a room. Dave Gettleman locked him into a room and said, what does it take to get you? And he said, well, I'm not going anywhere else. Give me as much money as you possibly can. And that's why he walked away with such a big contract for Kenny Golladay. Now, what I think is going to happen is I agree with the sentiment for me to say just a bit. I think that he has every right to walk away. I think he does. I think he has every right to go searching for that ring. I think he's a great piece for a team that's ring ready, that needs that last, infinity stone. I'm thinking about, I don't even really know anymore, because the dynamic in the league is so different. I'm thinking maybe Patrick Mahomes is looking for another wide receiver, because for some reason Andy Reid gets Mahomes whatever he wants. I'm looking at other teams who might have a bunch of cap space, specifically considering that the cap is now over $200 million. It's raised more than it was last year, which was a considerable dip with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're looking at teams who have more money to spend. Allen Robinson is probably going to test the free agency market. I don't see the negotiations happening. I completely agree. And I think that they told him, look at the market right now. You really want to test this? Or do you want to sign this? Do you want to sign this tender right now, and we'll get this done with, and you can be free at the end of the year? I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because, again, you get this talent in Allen Robinson back in 2018. You see the impact he's had on this offense. And after you look at the list of quarterbacks he's been thrown to, it's almost like, man, maybe this guy does deserve a little bit better. But I like the point that you guys kind of were both kind of went off in opposite directions a little bit, because on the one hand, I do think, like, say Fields comes out and he balls out, like we're all hoping he does, right? And you're Allen Robinson, you're thinking, I can work with this kid. I'm willing to stay on a discount. That's great. On the other hand, you're a proven talent, and there's going to be some teams out there who are going to give you a lot of money. I'm not going to list off teams again, just because for the sake of the argument, we know what we're talking about here. But I don't think, I'm going to just answer this question. I don't think it's going to happen in the coming weeks. If it's going to happen, I think it's going to happen at the end of the season. I do not think if 5 times, if an extension is going to happen with the Chicago Bears, it's not going to happen in the first couple weeks, or in the coming weeks, excuse me. It's not.
But Sam, I'm going to go to you on this one. Give me a storyline that you're watching for the 2 phases of OTAs.
The battle for the wide receiver spots. So I think this year the Bears actually had a solid group in total coming into training camp. There are a lot of new faces, and there are a lot of guys who need to prove it this year. I'm keeping eyes on guys obviously like Anthony Miller, Riley Ridley, Javon Wims, and then you have a lot of newcomers, right? Marquise Goodwin is starting to build a really good relationship with Justin Fields. We've seen it on social media. You signed Damian Byrd from the Patriots, a productive wide receiver who might get phased out just because there's too much talent, right? You brought in Chris Lacey after this rookie training camp. There are Daz Newsome as well as another guy who has taken headlines because of his personality, but could end up being a solid contributor on the offense. This is going to be a lot of fun to see what the Bears do with wide receiver this year, because again, do you stick with the guys that you know, or do you have a massive overhaul? Because again, the future of Allen Robinson is unknown. The only guy that you know you have consistently long-term here is Darnell Mooney. And, that's another question. Is Mooney going to take the next step, especially with potentially Justin Fields taking the starting job at some point? The wide receiver spot is going to be a fun spot to watch and a fun spot to read about. I'm excited to see which guys are going to end up coming out when the cuts happen later in August. But in OTAs, that's where the battle begins.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just thinking about potential storylines, I think that's probably going to be the most interesting one to read about is Anthony Miller going to make the cut? Or are we going to ship him off as soon as possible? I think they kept him with I'm pro Anthony Miller. I think he's going to have a good year. I think he makes the final 52. I think he has a good year. I like him as a talent. I think he has every tool necessary to be a good slot in the NFL. We just talk about that leadership problem. We talk about that, little swagger problem that unfortunately I think is a little over, I think people complain about it too much, to be completely honest with you. It was at the end of the game in a wild card game that was about to be lost anyways. But I mean, he's a talented guy. I think really the most interesting thing that we brought in at the wide receiver talent this year in this offseason is speed. We brought in a lot of speed. And I think what people need to remember is some of these guys aren't going to be brought in for reps at the wide receiver position. They're going to be brought in for reps at punt return and kick return. With Cordell Patterson gone, unfortunately, we need a good, solid option at that spot. And I don't know if Nagy's going to throw Tariq Cohen out there at the punt return anymore after his injury last season. So I think we're looking at Marquise Goodwin as a potential returner. I think we're looking at Byrd. He's pure speed. We're looking at him as a potential kick returner. We brought in guys like Khalil Herbert. He's pure speed. He's a one-cut back. He's got ridiculous balance and poise, and he brought back a couple touchdown kick returns his last year at VT. So I think we have an incredible level of depth. And Khalil Herbert's a running back, but he could play wide receiver if they want him to. They could develop him into a slot if they wanted it to. I don't think they should, but that's the dynamic offense that we're currently looking at, which makes me so excited. I think Daz Newsome makes the 52. I think he just does. I think he has too much skills not to. But I think that pick was pointing at Anthony Miller and saying, look, you're replaceable, dude. We can get somebody else if you can't prove it. So guess what? Prove it. You have a year to prove it to us. I think his talent alone carries him into the 52. I don't see him getting cut. But again, I think Newsome takes some reps away from him this year. And I think that we're starting to transition into a post Anthony Miller, post Allen Robinson wide receiver core.
Yeah, the wide receiver is going to be interesting. Look, for me, the one storyline I'm watching for is how healthy are some of these older vets on defense. You look at Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, but mostly Robert Quinn, because his cap hit does jump up to $15 million this year, and he can't have another disappointing season. Otherwise, next year at this time, he is going to be a post-June 1st cut. Bryson, I do think we're going to see a Chiefs-type offense in Chicago, but you also have to understand something, is that it took years for the Chiefs to build to the offense that they have now, which means it's going to take a couple years with Justin Fields as well. But guys, let's talk studs and duds here. Sam, you're a stud, but give me one stud you're watching for at OTAs, and then follow it up with one dud.
My stud's going to be Thomas Graham Jr. I like this kid a lot. I have watched a couple of his highlights on YouTube and stuff. I like what this kid's got in his game. He is everything I'm looking for in a nickel cornerback spot. I think he's going to compete for that spot. I don't think it's necessarily his, but I think it's his to fight for. I mean, my biggest thing is he took a year off. Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be a step behind? Obviously, he's not the best cornerback in this draft. Otherwise, he would have been drafted sooner. But he had a 4th-round grade in the draft this year and fell into the 6th. And in a position where the Bears kind of had some question marks in. So I think he's going to ball out during this time. I think this is his opportunity to shine. And I feel very confident in him as kind of one of the gems in this draft class. My dud is Riley Ridley. I want to believe in Riley Ridley so bad. I have always kind of stuck my foot out for him the past 2 years. I've been like, listen, this kid gets a shot. Like, I think he can pretty similar to his brother in Atlanta. But look, so many people want to advocate for him, and they advocated for him during the season. But when you're a football coach and you have a bunch of players that you have to decide, I can't play all these guys in a game, Ridley clearly didn't do enough to say, hey, you know what? Maybe he's wide receiver 4 or 5 right now. Obviously, he's had a couple lingering injuries in training camp and stuff that have hindered him as well, but how long can we defend this guy until we realize, you know what, this just was not a good pick in the 4th round, especially when you look at the overall wide receivers we brought in this year? Like, are you keeping Ridley over a guy like Bird, over a guy like Goodwin? Like, are you keeping him over a guy like Newsome? Probably not. But at the same time, like, it's one of those situations where the Bears are going to lose out on talented wide receivers solely because they just have too many options this year. I don't know if Ridley has deserved anything when he has played to keep a roster spot. I hope he proves me wrong. Honestly, I do, because if he can play half the way that his brother does, he could be a stud on this offense that we find this year. But until that happens, he's my dud. I need to see something out of him this offseason. I need to see something out of him in preseason. He's got to prove it to me, because otherwise he's my dud. He's my big fat dud.
Well, I broke down Riley Ridley, and Max, I'll let you go in a moment here. I wrote about Riley Ridley for the website, and Riley Ridley is a really good route runner. He's decent with separation, but what separates him from, and he's a very good wide receiver when it comes to 50-50 balls, but what truly separates him from his brother Calvin in Atlanta is the fact that he just really lacks that speed element. Ultimately, that's the big difference maker right there, is Ridley does not have, you could say, the track level speed that some of these other guys in the room do. But Max, give me some studs and duds, man.
Yeah, so I have a couple studs and I have a box full of milk duds, because I think there's a lot of fat that needs to be trimmed here from this roster. So studs for me are going to be Tevin Jenkins. Can't see enough reps of this guy. Looking at Khalil Herbert, big on this guy. Juice. I'm really excited we got him. He was graded incredibly high. And the fact that he felt so low to us, I don't know what it is about Ryan Pace, but whew, he finds these mid-round gems. So say what you want about him, but he's a guru at the mid-round draft. Who else do I like that I'm looking forward to? Daz Newsome for sure. See if he ate enough Waffle House in the offseason. Maybe he's not as fast as he used to be. I want to see Robert Quinn. I think he's a stud. I think he dealt with the injury issues that he kept from the media and from the public for a while, but his end of the season production numbers went up drastically. And the highest graded game of his season last year was against the Saints in that wild card performance. So I'm looking forward to seeing where he can improve his game. And hopefully he returns to form that we gave him all that money for. So I see him as a stud just because I'm confident in his return. And of course, Justin Fields, because you have to say it. It's too easy not to. For my duds, I'm looking at guys like Jesper Horsted that make me, scratch my head as to why we're looking at them still on the roster. I'm looking at guys like Desmond Trufant. I'm not sure if that's a dud. I think he could perform better, but I think he's really just going to be a voice in the locker room, which is good. To your comment, Bryson, I think I'm looking at guys like Duke Shelley. I'm not entirely sold on Duke Shelley as a cornerback or just as a talent in the NFL. I think he has a lot to prove it this year specifically. I don't know if he can do it. Riley Ridley for sure. There's like two guys on this team that I always have to be reminded that are on the team. Riley Ridley is one of them. I saw him on that commercial, and it's like Chicago Bears wide receiver, and I was like, who? And I was like, oh yeah, that guy. Okay, yeah. Javon Wims, he's still on the team, isn't he? So yeah. He's a dud. See, I had to ask you because I didn't even know. You think he'd be kicked off the team after pulling those stunts, but here he is. That's a dud. Hopefully he gets off the team. But that's the thing. We're talking about Anthony Miller's problems off the field or on the field. Why aren't we talking about Javon Wims? Why is he still on the roster? And he hasn't done anything for this team except drop an easy pass in the end zone that could have won this wild card game. But anyways, those are my studs and duds. I'll have a lot more as the OTAs progress, but I'm just looking at like, why is Jesper Horsted still on the team? Why is Ron Williams still in Chicago?
I can't believe you went after my guy Horsted. I am appalled.
JP is better. So
yeah, I mean, I'm being
the other JH. They're both JHs, which I think is interesting.
Horsted was just fun because I think it was 2019 when he had that catch, and I was like, all right, this is my guy. Like I love no other reason. And then I was like, he's not actually good at football, but
yeah, like me with Adam Shaheen, but you know,
ouch.
Well, my studs and duds are interesting because I do not want to name Justin Fields because I know everyone's going to name Justin Tyler Fields. But yes, I memorized his middle name when I was doing research on these prospects. Fun fact, I'm not a stalker by any means. But I think you look at it, man, my stud is going to be Tariq Cohen. I want to see how he bounces back after that ACL injury. I do know that let's just say the Bears limit some of the on-field work, and obviously they're not going to be going at full speed, but that ACL injury, it is going to impact. You have to wonder if it's going to impact Tariq Cohen's ability to make some of those cuts that we're traditionally used to seeing him make and just completely roast guys in space. Cole Kmet's another really good one. Yeah. I think when you look at Cole Kmet, I mean, he played like 86% of snaps during the final 7 weeks of the season last year. Part of that was because of scheme. Part of that was just because they gave him more and more to do as the season went on. And I do think Cole Kmet, he's going to take a year to jump, but it's not going to be like massively significant. But if all goes well, the Bears don't need Cole Kmet to be the next Antonio Gates or Tony Gonzalez, honestly. Even if he turns into a Zach Ertz light in this offense, which I think he can become, he'll be fine. That's good enough, honestly. And then I've got two duds here, actually. Number one dud is Desmond Trufant. Like you mentioned, Bryson, the Bears are not even super committed to Desmond Trufant because when you signed him, you originally thought, well, he's going to be CB2 opposite Jalen Johnson. Look, it's only $1 million contract. They can get out of that easily this offseason. And $1 million in NFL money is clearly chump change when you're paying an aging veteran who only played and started, I believe, like 6 games last year. But my second dud is honestly, I think Travis Gibson's going to be my second dud because he had a good year last year, but he was not great by any means. But I will say this, I'm really excited for a guy I think could be another stud in Charles Snowden Jr., a player that a lot of people are thinking is going to be Leonard Floyd 2.0 in the sense that he can get after the passer. He does have some bend. There is some speed to power there. He can impact the run game, but also drop back in coverage. So I want to see Charles Snowden Jr. as well.